Cool. I said it in my thing, too.
Hey, this is Chris here with Tony P. If you are in the Zoom room and you can hear us right now, you want to be a part of the conversation talking about the government shutdown, feel free to turn your cameras on. We will bring you into the conversation when we can. We go live here in about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Boom, there it is. It's 9 o'clock on this Wednesday night. And it's a busy Wednesday night, Tony P.
I mean, we're going to cover probably one story tonight, but it is the biggest one. And we are signaling the beginning of the end, actually the end, of the 41-plus day saga that we cover every night. So you know what? Yes, let's make it the one thing tonight.
The one thing to cover. Listen, this is the Live Zone Primetime. If you are just joining us, we tell you to what's new, what's happening over the next 60 minutes, and the biggest story happening out there right now is the beginning of the end of the government shutdown. Right now, taking a live look at the White House and the U.S. Capitol, because just moments ago, the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, moments from ending, could conclude as soon as tonight. The latest we're hearing is 9:45 is when it could reach the president's desk. Day 43, though, the U.S. House of Representatives voted just about 45 minutes ago to reopen the government. That funding bill had already passed the Senate. It will now go to the president's desk. Like I said, we're hearing around 9:45. He's scheduled to sign it. If or when that happens, and if there is a live shot, we will bring that to you. President Trump has called this bill a very big victory. However, the possibility of an end to the shutdown draws near. No one in Congress really that satisfied, Tony P.
No, not really. I mean, again, the overall vote was 222 to 208. Again, only 3 members not voting for this, and not voting at all. So it was pretty much the whole Congress was there. A lot of people were thinking, could they even get this done by tonight? They were thinking by probably Thursday, even Friday for a potential vote. I was watching some of the Punchbowl News and Jake Sherman's commentary over the weekend. He was thinking maybe Thursday or Friday this thing gets moving, but they came back to town. They had the vote. They got the numbers to pass, and barring any delay, in the bill being transferred over to the president's desk, this thing will be signed tonight and things will reopen tomorrow. The biggest thing that I found interesting too is that there's going to be some logistical kind of snags as this shutdown ends and we get back into regular government functioning, because these systems, especially for the payment systems, a lot of federal employees have missed 2 and 3 paychecks, especially our incredible TSA and air traffic controllers that were working on the job without any pay, and our military officials as well.
On this vote, the yeas are 222, the nays are 209.
You keep going, Tony.
passed.
This was moments ago.
Gotcha.
This
Make sure.
This was that vote moments ago.
Oh
I just wanted to play this
No, you're
while we were
good, you're
chatting
good,
about
you're
it,
good.
in case you missed it.
Again, I don't want to interrupt live news.
No,
I'm always
no,
very
no,
much.
no.
They had another vote. No, so where was I? So the biggest thing about this is logistically. There's a lot of federal employees here in D.C. and DMV. It may take a little bit of time for those checks to process. It's not going to be the minute we open up tomorrow. All the checks get brought back and retroactive pay. It's going to take some time because a lot of these HR systems are manual, and every single department, Chris, does HR processing differently. There is not one unified system. So defense does it one way. They have one provider. They have a different process. And going back to my accounting days as a CPA, you learn about internal controls. The internal controls are different across the federal government. So it may take a little bit of time for those checks to come back, but thank God we're in the middle of the month, as opposed to getting to the end of the month when a lot of bills end up being due. So luckily, and hopefully, we'll be able to get those checks ready to rock and roll in the coming days for people to pay some stuff for last month and get things settled and squared away for this month. So again, just one little logistical thing, and that also carries into the airline delays as well. This is going to still take some time. Again, there are still thousands of cancellations being done at the airports. Still, it's going to be a little bit of what kind of like creep for a while until things get back to normal. Everybody gets back online. They're getting paid. The air traffic controllers come back to full staffing, and also they had a lot of managerial situations where different controls were doing a lot more jobs than they were paid to do. So that type of work, kind of spreading all that out, that's something that's going to have to be done and getting everybody back into their roles. So it could take some time to get everything back online is the biggest thing. This is not the magic bullet. We still have a few days to go until people start to feel back to normal. But this is a major step tonight as the U.S. House of Representatives passed this bill, a CR, which is a continuing resolution, and it's like they call it a minibus. I never heard that term
instead of the omnibus. Yes.
Yeah, I never heard that term in my 3 years here in D.C. or in my entire life loving politics and policy. But the minibus, it's 3 appropriations bills. SNAP is funded through next year, and there were some firings that will be so people that were fired from the RIFs through this shutdown and before will be reinstated, and they'll also get their back pay. And there are protections for future reduction in forces in government shutdowns and for the future as well generally. So there are some really good pieces of news for federal employees, not just getting their retroactive payback and getting back on the job, but also some of the firings of their fellow colleagues or former colleagues. They'll be back on the job and getting back pay in the coming weeks.
So you did mention the flights. The FAA announced today that they were going to maintain flight cuts at 6%. Tomorrow they were supposed to go to 8%. By the end of the week they were supposed to go to 10%.
Right.
However, with the news of the impending shutdown ending, more air traffic controllers have started to show up to work. However, no word yet when they will bring flights back to full. However, they will remain at 6% tomorrow. So even though there are still going to be delays and cancellations, that is actually good news. Couple housekeeping notes. The YouTube comment section is open. You can ask questions there.
Yes.
You can leave comments there. I'm looking at some of the comments there. And yeah, when we mentioned the cameras on, we were talking about the Zoom room. That's people who are watching on Fox Local on their connected TVs. They can scan that QR code in the bottom. We do have quite a few people in there right now.
Please,
Mark, Alex,
us
Harriet, Ryan, we see you all, but we don't see any faces right now. So if you want to weigh in on the situation, turn your cameras on, we'll bring you in. In the meantime, we mentioned the White House. We mentioned President Donald Trump sent to sign this bill. What we're hearing is around 9:45. But what I can also tell you is our very own Fox 5's Jim Loke. He is at the White House right now, so he will have live coverage of this when we can go to him. Maybe not necessarily in this hour, maybe not even necessarily in the next hour,
11.
but if or when, he's got a front seat to history happening right now.
Sure does. And he was also with the president over the weekend in the motorcade and part of the press team at the Commanders game versus the Detroit Lions. So again, Jim Loke is the best, and he'll be on the scene to give us a lot of great answers and insight of what's going on inside the White House and just the process of this bill being passed. You know, as a huge West Wing fan, it's shocking, I know, but this reminds me of a West Wing episode where now we have, we're seeing the bill pass live. We're seeing the I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, and it's going through all the stuff. And then this bill, which, I mean, if you look at any size bill or CR, it's usually about this thick. It's like a couple of binders stacked on top of each other, and that has to go all the way to the White House. And usually, it's brought into the desk, and we get to see them sign it. And there's usually only one page that gets signed from the bill. It isn't like one big thing he signs like this with. It's going to be quite the scene. And again, we're seeing the process, how it's played out, how democracy and civics work in front of our eyes. Whether it be we see the passage in the House of Representatives, and then we're seeing it literally in real time go right up the street, Pennsylvania Avenue, to the White House, and then it'll be signed. That's the action of government. So it's
30
like
minutes and change. We are getting some reaction coming in. Governor Wes Moore released the following statement after Congress advanced that funding bill. This is exactly why people hate Washington. Once again, Republicans in D.C. are asking us to accept a false choice: fund the government or protect people's health care. That's not leadership. This is Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. Marylanders know what's at stake. They've lived the shutdown. They're the federal workers who miss paychecks, the SNAP recipients wondering how to feed their families, the seniors worried about keeping the heat on. We've stepped up to do our part, releasing tens of millions of dollars to keep food on the table, covering heating costs for Marylanders in November, and making transit free for federal workers. So yes, reopening the government matters, but healthcare premiums will continue to rise, and Marylanders are the ones who will pay the price or lose coverage. Altogether, this is a deal I have grave concerns about. We can't keep asking working families to choose between a paycheck and a doctor's visit. Maryland is doing its job. It's time Donald Trump and Washington did theirs without selling out the people they're supposed to protect, Tony B. So that's from Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
Right, and this healthcare conversation is not going away, because in this proposed deal that 8 Democrats signed on to with the Republican caucus in the Senate is that it does include a promised vote on the ACA subsidies issue for healthcare premiums. Of course, it was a COVID era piece of legislation, also extended as part of the Inflation Reduction Act by President Biden in 2022, with an expiration date of December 31st, 2025. So again, it was a temporary program meant to help out during the COVID era and the fallout from COVID. And it became a very popular policy because the ACA, after about 10, 12 years, is still pretty popular among Americans, because now, and this is going to get very technical, but there's a thing in public policy called path dependency, where you start to go down the road of a new policy, whether it be back in the 40s and 50s, we had employer-based health care for the first time post-World War II. And then that kind of got us on the track to having private health insurance and employer-based coverage. And then there was this issue with people who weren't employed with a regular W-2 job, and how did that work for those type of families, or families that were working poor, that didn't have full-time employment. Maybe their employers couldn't afford health insurance. So there started to be kind of these different ideas that floated around. So you had Medicare come in for the elderly, when there was a gap in that coverage for about 20 years, from the 40s to the 60s. Then you had issues with young children and SNAP recipients in the 1990s. We had the CHIP plan out of the Clinton administration. A lot of this patchwork effort happened until 2010 with the landmark ACA law. But it kept us on the path of the private market, the exchanges, still having employer-based health care. And the reason why you're still seeing a lot of support is because that's what people are now used to. It's the norm. So people don't want to see their premiums go up, because it's been about 4 or 5 years now of these subsidized premiums, and people are used to a certain cost infrastructure when it comes to their health insurance. And people don't want to see this again. These are real families that are being impacted. They could lose their health insurance, have to make choices between the rent or food or the health insurance, especially if you have a long-term condition or you're chronically ill. So this discussion is not over. And what was really interesting that Speaker Johnson was talking about in his press conference after the bill was passed is that he started using the term the Unaffordable Health Care Act, and basically started hammering that home. And that says to me, as a marketing and messaging strategist, that's going to be their discussion points as this negotiation begins with Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans on this issue of the ACA subsidies. It's not going to be about the subsidies generally, about a 1-year or a 6-month extension. It's going to be about the viability of the ACA generally, is what my opinion is, because that's where this conversation could be headed. And Speaker Johnson was saying we have a plethora of ideas we want to talk about in the next month or so, how we can fix health care. And he said pretty clearly there'll be no deal on the ACA subsidies if there aren't significant reforms to it, or if there isn't an agreement on these new health care plans that Republicans have. And it's a pretty bold move. Republicans have been talking about health care reform and repeal and replace for about 8 to 10 years now, if not longer. And remember, one of the largest and longest shutdowns in recent memory was in 2013, when Texas Senator Ted Cruz single-handedly held the government open, held the government closed, because he wanted to see a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And that did not work, obviously. And it was held up by the courts eventually, too. There was some court challenges in 2015. But it goes to show you what is the effectiveness of using shutdowns to advance policy goals. As I've heard many political strategists say across social media and just through my feeds all day, that government shutdowns usually don't work for policy changes. And there's no winning, there's only degrees of losing.
Right.
You can't say for sure
Compared
that...
it to a divorce earlier
right,
this week.
exactly. There's a great, what's the movie called? War of the Roses with Michael Douglas, a DMV-themed movie, by the way, about a D.C. lawyer. And that was one of the lines that Danny DeVito said, where he was talking to Michael Douglas, trying to talk him up the ledge about going through the whole divorce proceedings, and he goes, there's no winning in divorce, only degrees of losing. So that is how this shutdown looks. But if you look at the political side, Democrats, their messaging is a lot better. Maybe they're more popular or the president's less popular. But this is what I don't like about politics in D.C. a lot, is that we still talk about things through the political lens when people's real lives are impacted. Federal employees, air traffic controllers that are saving lives, that are keeping us safe. We have military. We just had Veterans Day. Veterans benefits on hold. I mean, these are real people's lives. And I think it's a
Tony, we have these comments up. In the meantime, you may have been looking at. So I do want to say, INFNG, will Trump sign stream on this channel, you guys? Yes. If it happens, we will bring it to you live. If it happens within this hour, we will also have a live stream going on Fox 5 YouTube page. Determined Quad, they need to make healthcare affordable for all American citizens. Some of these premiums are ridiculously high. People should not have to choose between healthcare and buying food or necessity items. You mentioned the House Speaker, you mentioned him referring to it as the Unaffordable Healthcare Act. He did speak moments after this bill passed. I do want to play a portion of that for you now in case you missed it. So stand by, I'm going to get that ready. Here we come.
Well, good evening, everybody. We feel very relieved tonight. The Democrat shutdown is finally over, thanks to House and Senate Republicans who stood together to get the job done. Absolutely no question in anybody's mind now that the Democrats were responsible for this. What happened? Millions of American families went without food on their table. You had millions of Americans stranded in airports with their flights canceled and delayed. You had troops and federal employees wondering where their next paycheck would come from. The Democrats openly admitted, many of them said it in their own words, that they used the American people as leverage in this political game. They knew that it would cause that pain to the people, and they did it anyway. They did it for their own selfish purposes, their political purposes, and it was a game they played with real people's lives. It's something that is very difficult to forgive. I want to say that all this was utterly pointless and foolish. This outcome was totally foreseeable. I said that this would be the outcome when all this began back in mid-September. They did it anyway. Democrats admitted that they used the people as leverage, and they got nothing for their selfish political stunt here. They didn't achieve anything with this at all. And anyone who studied history would know that shutdowns never yield any positive result. It just hurts people. I said on the House floor a little while ago that we did all this in good faith. From the very beginning, I was insistent about this. Our leadership team was. The Republicans did the right thing. We had a nonpartisan continuing resolution. We didn't have any Republican priorities on it at all. We just said, in good faith, let's keep the lights on. Let's keep this going for another 7 weeks so that the Congress can do its work, so they can get back to the regular appropriations process, the way that it is supposed to be done for the people, so that we're good stewards with their money. That hasn't been done here in a long time. And we said we want to get back to that. Now, I'm pleased that tonight on the CR we had 3 appropriations bills that we'll send over to the President's desk in just a short amount of time tonight to get signed into law. That's an innovation too. As you all know, it's been years since Congress actually did separate appropriations bills. I'm proud of that achievement, but I'm really sad that it took us so long to get here. It was so much pain that had to be endured to get to this point. Voters are going to remember which political party played games with their lives. They're going to remember that they did this for their own selfish purposes so that they could look tough to the radical elements of their base, and real people suffered because of that game. So now that we've got the lights back on, we've got the government reopened, the president will sign that triumphantly tonight, and Republicans will get right back to the work that we promised the American people that we will do. We're going to deliver for the American people, as we have been doing. And I'll leave you with this thought. There's a split screen in America right now. There's a split screen. On one side of the screen, you have President Trump and the Republican majorities in the Congress and the Senate and the House doing the work for the American people. Look what we've achieved in the first 10 months of this year. You can make an argument that it's the most productive season for a new Congress and a new presidency, a new administration, at least in the modern era, maybe of all time. Just in this short amount of months, we got the border secured. We fulfilled that promise. We are working on the crime crisis around the country. We have new trade agreements. We have a return to American energy dominance. We have cut taxes, the largest tax cut in U.S. history in a literal sense. We're cutting regulations. We're ending fraud, waste, and abuse out of government. We're shoring up the safety net programs like Medicaid so that it's there for the people that desperately need it, and it is not being abused by illegal aliens and by young able-bodied men who are not eligible to receive that. We are doing all this good work. The president, meanwhile, is using his authority to change the world, literally. He has ended 8 wars around the globe. All of this is happening on the Republican side and so much more. That's on one side of the screen, and on the other is the Democrat Party. And what have they done? What do they have to show for the last 10 months of government here? They shut the government down. They voted 15 times to close the government and exact that pain on everyone. We can never forget that. They haven't achieved anything beyond that except pushing ICE officers around and really spurring on political violence. So I want to say that there's a reason the Democrats are in disarray right now. There's a reason they don't have an identified leader of their party. There's a reason that their favorability, even amongst those in their own party, is at lowest of all time. They don't have a platform, a principle they can defend. They don't have a leader, except for Mondami, who's the new mayor of New York City and leading the party into Marxism and socialism. I think everybody should consider that split screen. I think you should look at it truthfully and honestly and objectively. And I think you can evaluate for yourself which party's working for the people. We're anxious to get that done, to work on health care and affordability and all the issues, to continue doing what we've done. And we look forward to rolling that out for you in the next several days. A few questions, yes?
You said earlier that you would...
All right, Tony P. So that was House Speaker Mike Johnson covering a lot of bases there, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah.
A couple quick notes. If the Democrats do come out and speak after this vote, we will take you to that live as well. But as of right now, that has not happened yet, but we will keep an eye on that. Also, our colleague Jim Loke did point out a couple of things. Mike Johnson has called this a clean bill, but this bill doesn't just end the shutdown. It also includes the following: a ban on many hemp-derived products like THC drinks and edibles. It allows several Republican senators to retroactively sue the government for $500,000 for having their phone records examined on January 6th. It reaffirms back pay for employees affected by the shutdown, which a lot of people will agree with, obviously, and it reverses 4,200 federal layoffs put into place when the shutdown began. The president had attempted to lay off more workers. That came on the heels of, obviously, what happened with Doge earlier this year. House Speaker Mike Johnson also referring to some of the accomplishments that Republicans have done, the House has done, but the House also just spent the last 7 weeks in recess, Tony.
Right, and the Republican Party did suffer some major losses last week in Virginia, in New Jersey, especially at the state level in terms of some of those state Senate races, and in Georgia for 2 statewide offices. So there is pressure. And you mentioned, you saw Speaker Johnson say affordability. That is going to be a word you're going to see, especially, and they're going to try to tie it to this health care debate. So just watch out for that one, because that's going to be, again, the biggest thing. And President Trump mentioned it in his speech to the Republican caucus in the House and the Senate, that affordability was a big problem in those kind of mini midterm 2025 elections in Virginia and New Jersey, where there were some opportunities for Republicans to pick up some ground or even make it close. Didn't happen at all. So there's going to be a lot of conversations about affordability, and you're going to see that language really focus in. And also, President Trump last week was saying Republicans aren't taking enough credit for what they're doing or talking about it. You're seeing that reflected here in Mike Johnson's address here tonight. And when you look at the overall the whole rundown of this shutdown. I'll use that string of words, is that you're still seeing a pretty stark divide between these two parties. And even though there was a bipartisan agreement in the Senate, in the House, just for people who don't know, it's a lot more chaotic in the House. The divisions are a lot more exposed because of the nature of the House. There's more of them. And a lot of these gerrymandered districts, many members of Congress grandstand on both sides of the aisle to get their point across. So the divisions are a lot deeper as opposed to what you see in the Senate. It's basically like two different reality shows. One that's kind of PG-13, and in the House it's rated R. So just kind of, just again, not the same thing.
Well, Tony P., we talked about the federal employees, obviously, most likely, regardless of what side of the aisle, we're excited that the shutdown coming to an end.
Money's green.
Record shutdown coming to an end. And I know we have a federal employee in the Zoom room right now.
Hey guys, can you hear me all right?
We can
What's
hear
going on?
you.
I hear you perfectly.
Just so anyone out there is watching, we are choosing to protect anonymity, so you will only hear their voice and see us in the meantime. But if you could talk to us just a little bit about how you're feeling at this moment after 43 days that this shutdown could finally be coming to an end.
Yeah. No, it was a long 43 days, and obviously, really excited that it's coming to an end. I think a lot of the issues that kind of came about, as I think I heard you guys say earlier, it's gonna, stick around and linger longer. As Tony and I talked about before, there were a lot of people leaving or maybe getting cut, but general vibes are up, and I'll use some of the lingo that we use in here. We talk about, people, we make light of it, saying people are getting tickled. So the general vibe is, there's less people getting tickled and people are feeling a little bit less ticklish, but the tickle monster's still out there. He hasn't completely gone away. So that's the general vibe.
Let me ask you this. So upon the passage of this bill, did you get an email or notification in a certain channel, whatever, how everybody communicates with the supervisors? Was there any correspondence from your agency to the employee workforce, or is that still up in the air?
I haven't seen anything, so I'd say still up in the air.
Gotcha. And in your experience, do you see people folks going back to work tomorrow, or could this be maybe a half day or a delay, or is it all going to just start tomorrow, even though things passed late in the night tonight? What are your thoughts on that?
It's still hard to say. I think we'll see some people coming back that are in some of the critical functions. But in general, maybe like some lower level employees, might take a bit longer. The only real immediate impact is, some of the key folks in key areas.
Let me ask you a quick question. Obviously this is a stopgap measure, a minibus like Tony made reference to earlier. We could be right back in the same situation come the end of the year, beginning of the new year. How does that make you feel, that this isn't even the end of the road, really?
Yeah, not great. It's, like I said, the tickle monster's still out there. So we're holding out hope right now, but I guess we'll have to ultimately wait and see for what's in store come the new year.
Do you think, again, so talking to people that you work with and just, friends of yours in the industry, do you feel that potential shutdowns back to back will have even a bigger impact this time when it comes to expenditures, things like rent or food, as opposed to maybe for some they could weather this storm, but if it happens back to back, it could be a different story next time?
Yeah, for sure. It'd be a compounding effect. As obviously, folks aren't getting their paychecks. So yeah, I can't say exactly what it might look like or what it could look like, but I think some of the impacts that federal employees are feeling now, it'll get worse, or it could get worse. So it's certainly a concern here.
throughout the time, not just the last week or so, but I'd say in the last couple of weeks, have you seen a lot of outreach from your union in terms of not just for benefits, but for overall support or just guidance about what's going on and going back to work, or has the union not been as active?
I'd say not as active.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's kind of what makes it hard. Feels like we're a little bit on our own at the moment. Each individual. So, yeah.
And you mentioned something to me when we did a little interview a while back. You mentioned about not just, again, when, for a lot of the critical infrastructure, there's a lot of employees that, were on the job not getting paid. A lot of them had to do, multiple jobs at once or double shifts or take on roles that they weren't as senior enough for yet. Do you see those individuals keeping those roles now that they're so used to it 43 days in, or is there going to be a reassessment, people going back to former positions or former role responsibilities, or do you see kind of things kind of staying the way they are, especially with the holiday rush coming in and different, things with SNAP and, holidays being a big time for Treasury, for air traffic control, whatever you want to say, like that could be a lot of, of impact. So do you see those role responsibilities changing or things staying the same in terms of work?
Yeah, I think there will be a little bit more switch around, as people who were given a lot more responsibility in this time. I can see that normalizing a bit for sure. But that won't go for everyone. It's for better or for worse. Some people who got more responsibility earlier on than they otherwise would have. They might have to hold a lot more of those responsibilities going forward still. It's, I guess you wouldn't see a huge change right now from where we are, but efficiency will still kind of, it won't spike back up to where it was immediately. And I know when we spoke last time, I mentioned we could start to see flights canceled, which obviously that's happened.
Right, you were right.
Yeah, and so it's I mean those are some of those inefficiencies that have led to that I'm kind of talking about. So it's not an immediate ramp back up, but over time maybe.
And when you look at some of the provisions in this new CR, where some of the RIFs, about 4,200 employees will be coming back on the job, getting retroactive pay, all those type of things. Does that make federal employees feel that maybe some of these reduction in forces could be over for the foreseeable future, since this deal includes bringing employees back? We did have a lot of volatility with some of the firings.
Or if I may, does it make you want to continue on with the job knowing that there was the threat that, hey, when this happens, we're just going to let you go despite years of service and dedication?
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the hard part. That's that's the tickle monster we're all scared of. I'd say it's I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question. I think a lot of people here do the job because they enjoy it, and obviously once you get embedded into a job, especially in the federal government, it can be harder to switch. But some folks who are feeling extra ticklish, they're gonna wanna move on a little bit quicker. And so for some folks, I can definitely see that. But myself, not necessarily. But I guess I would say I think about it more now than before.
Interesting.
Well, K.A., thank you so much for spending some time with us here tonight on the Live Zone and
thank you,
sharing your perspective. And I know you don't speak for all federal employees, but I know a lot of federal employees out there probably feel the same way.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tony, I did want to kind of come back to another tangential issue to what happened today.
Right.
The House came back in session, and one of their first orders of business before they got to work on this bill, voting to reopen the government, was swearing in a new member of
Yes,
Congress.
that
And
was
this
a big-
was its own separate drama. And then talk to me a little bit about that, and then we'll get into kind of
The elephant in the room.
the elephant in the
The
room,
elephant in
which
the
is, of course, those Epstein emails.
Yes.
Because swearing in this additional Democrat added some ammunition
Yes.
to what happened today as well. So
Because in a lot of ways, and so when Grijalva, representative-elect at the time, Representative now Grijalva from Arizona, when she was elected, I think it was a couple months ago now.
Yep. She
She
set a
immediately-
record as well
yeah, right,
for
the longest time
wait
being in
before she was allowed to take her oath of office.
Because usually there isn't that amount of time for a representative-elect doesn't happen in a special election. Usually, you know, you get elected in a midterm year or an election year, you take a few months, just like a president-elect or a presidential re-election. But in this case, it was definitely, you know, out of commission for a couple of months, which is totally rare. But the big reason for this was because, you know, there was, again, an empty seat, which when you look at the overall math to pass bills, when you have one less representative, one less Democrat, it's easier for Republicans to pass some of the legislation because of the one less seat. And again, with votes, it isn't about, okay, the whole 538. The majority needed is only of the people on the floor voting at the time. So 1-2 seats in a majority for Republicans where they can only afford to lose between 2 and 3 Republican defectors, any way to get that average up, they're going to keep it. And Democrats have done it too. So it's a numbers game. As Nancy Pelosi used to say, the math is about mathing. And same thing here with Speaker Johnson. He was playing that role as well. So I think that was a big reason for the delay. Democrats complained that, hey, Speaker Johnson was in town. They could have sworn Grijalva in, got the training going, the what do you call it? Not inauguration. What am I looking for? Like in college. When you go to college for meditation. I can't find the word, meditation. Oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for?
What are you talking?
Orientation.
Orientation.
Where are my words tonight?
That's okay,
Orientation.
Tony.
Orientation. And they could have gotten that done. But instead, there was a decision made to keep the Congress out, to keep any business from flowing. And a big reason for this as well is because Grijalva, the now Representative Grijalva, said that she would sign onto the discharge petition that is bipartisan to release the Epstein files. And that has been a topic of contention between the White House and some congressional Republicans. Speaker Johnson's caught in the middle of this. And Democrats have started to use an issue that was started in the 2024 election cycle by President Donald Trump. He went on a lot of the quote-unquote manosphere bro podcasts, especially the comedy ones, to talk about the Epstein files. And that was a major motivator for a lot of young men across the spectrum and in a very diverse coalition to vote for President Trump after voting for President Biden 4 years prior. It was about the transparency and government corruption and cover-ups, and that was the conspiracy theories. President Trump played into that, and now we're going to see it play out in real time with this.
Tony, I'm going to throw a little bit of an audible at you right now,
I like
because right now, independent journalist Corinne Clifford is actually joining us live. She's in the Zoom room,
God.
and you can see where she is right now. She is live at the
Whoa.
White House right now in the press
great.
briefing room.
This is like the briefing room, baby.
Sorry, Corinne. Sorry, 1 second. But Corinne, you've actually been there all day, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes, and we are waiting for President Trump to sign this into law at 9:45 p.m. And you can see behind me, all of the press, including someone from your station, is going to go into the Oval Office and witness President Trump sign this to end the 43-day U.S. federal government shutdown. So this is a very exciting day, and I love to give this to you live, in real life, in real time from the White House.
This is actually my first time interviewing someone from the press room. I've been in there a few times the last couple of years. It's an honor to have you on. Let me ask you this. Have you heard any rumblings about having the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, come out to do a recap, or the president coming into the press room, or is it going to be mainly for the Oval Office?
No, it's just going to happen in the Oval Office. Caroline Leavitt's not going to come out here. The people standing behind me, we walk into the Oval Office and we witness it. It's very professional, and you can ask questions. President Trump is the most transparent president. If you could ask President Trump one question, what do you think you would ask
Oh,
him?
you're asking me. I like the
Putting us on the
journalist throwing it on the
spot. I know,
host.
right?
I love
Exactly. Hey,
Ooh.
let me ask you. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this:
it. You go first, and I'll answer that.
Were you in the press room when the vote happened, and what energy, what's happening at the White House right now behind the scenes that you can share with us?
I mean, to be honest with you, I've been here all day, and the bottom line is that many people didn't think that this would happen. A lot of people were being really negative because there was a Democrat that was just inaugurated right before the vote into the House of Representatives. I'm not going to say her name and get into that too much, but a lot of people were really negative and didn't think it could happen. And once again, President Trump is proving that he can really make sure that the Republicans are united on the House side, which is so critical and key. And the Speaker of the House just did an incredible press conference and really explained what's going on.
Let me ask you, so maybe here's the one question I would ask if I was in that room. So with this health care debate coming up, President Trump has kind of talked about, hey, we got to keep Medicare in place. We got to keep some of the health care systems in place. Is there going to be a health care reveal from the president in these discussions over the ACA, whether it's reform or maybe different tax credits? That would be one question that I would ask. But have you heard anything in your circles and throughout the press corps about what the president's next steps may be about the health care issue? Because that's going to be an issue that's going to be on both sides for a while now.
I mean, President Trump cares so much about the health care issue. And today in the press briefing with Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, she made it very clear that President Trump wants Americans to have the health care that they need. Now, of course, it cannot be illegals. It can't be the migrants. It's got to be Americans, America first. And that's what President Trump cares about. He doesn't want us to use Obamacare anymore. He's proving the fact that Obamacare, was pretty much a scam. And I think that he's going to come up with a whole new program for us. And Secretary Kennedy had a huge MAHA event today at the Waldorf Astoria. And that's the number one thing. Dr. Oz, the head of Medicare. I mean, these people really care about Americans and America first. So I think they're going to come up with a whole new healthcare system for us that we all need.
All right. Well, no, go ahead, Tony.
In terms of, I was watching Speaker Johnson's address a little bit before. He was really harping on affordability and started talking about the Unaffordable Care Act. Do you think some of the messaging is going to start changing from Republicans post the elections in Virginia and New Jersey, where President Trump was pretty clear that it was a bad night for Republicans and they need to start talking about affordability? Do you sense that being the next step for Republican messaging, since there are some polls showing that he is slipping on the economic issue? Do you see that kind of ratcheting up from Republicans in the House and the Senate and from the White House itself?
I mean, 100%. I think it's all going to be about affordability. But, President Trump is giving every child that's born right now $1,000. President Trump is more than willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that healthcare is affordable. And he's made it very clear that he wants pharmaceutical costs to go way down. So it's just going to be a whole process. He's got to get the pharmaceutical companies to agree. He had a huge dinner tonight with big tech companies. I mean, he works 24/7 for us. Look at us right now. It's 9:45 plus p.m. at night, and President Trump is still working. There's press air everywhere. And even if people are negative, it's time for us all to be positive and take the time to call your two senators and your member of Congress, because they're listening. They're actually listening now.
So to that end, are you expecting any sort of bipartisan message coming out of this, or do you think it's going to be more finger pointing? We've heard some of the finger pointing right on the heels of that vote being passed, but there's still a lot of work to do because this is just a stopgap measure and we could be right in this same situation in a month.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So the funding does go until January. And yes, of course, this could happen because January is approaching fast. And I do think that it will get tough again because we're coming up to the midterm elections. So it's going to be very much Republican versus Democrat, Democrat versus Republican. But I do believe that there is a way to create a bipartisan agreement. I don't know quite yet what that's going to mean, but I do really want more billionaires and philanthropists to really help people. I thought it was really upsetting that the mothers and the children on the SNAP program were not getting assistance from the billionaires in their towns, their cities, their counties. I want people to start helping each other much more. That's very important.
Do you sense, again, so one of the things you mentioned was the affordability with the drug costs and some of the things that the president's doing with the new website that's up? A couple of questions. First, do you sense that he might try to bring some of that to the floor and get that into legislation for something that's more kind of long-term as opposed to an executive order? And when looking at kind of the outlook for this, potential future shutdown as well, again, we're hoping it doesn't happen, do you sense that the president's posture might change, and maybe he might get more involved? Again, this time he was traveling, he was a little bit not as involved as he usually is. Do you sense his posture might change as we head into January? If there isn't a deal coming, he might get more involved at the outset this time.
I think that President Trump was involved the whole time and he will be involved the whole time. I mean, he works 24/7 for us. But yes, he is diverted by creating peace deals all across the world. Ukraine and Russia is the #1 most important thing for him. But he does care about healthcare. And I think he's going to create a Trump healthcare. Like there was Obamacare. I think there's going to be Trump care. I think that's in the works.
Interesting.
All right. Corinne Clifford coming to us live
Thank
from
you
the
so
White
much. That's
House
so cool.
briefing
I
room.
love that.
I mean, we're down to 2 minutes. If this stays on time, we have to let you go so you can head into the Oval
exactly.
Office.
We don't want to
But
keep you.
we appreciate you spending some time with us tonight here on the Live Zone.
The press room's so cool.
So grateful. God bless you.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you. All right, Tony P. So, like we said, the president's supposed to sign that around 9:45. It is currently 9:44. We just took you live inside the White House. That's not something we get to do.
That was really
every
cool.
night here on the Live Zone Primetime.
That is, first of all, a really cool press room. I said before, not to be braggadocious, but I've been in there a couple of times, and it really is. It's a cool place to be, and to kind of see how the action unfolds. And what's really interesting is that just this past year, they started to put actual content creators, news content creators, especially. They have, I think it's a rotating 1 seat every day,
right,
where they get to go in there and ask a couple of questions. So I think what's really fascinating is now that room isn't just for, kind of mainstream journalists, whether they be at the local, regional level or at national level. Now we have national, international content creators doing it. We have independent journalists like we just saw, who are having, parts of that as well, which is very, very cool. And again, it's a very interesting room, and that's where you get to see everything. You get to see what is going on, whether it be a bill signing or a daily update, and it's very, very fascinating. And the funny thing about the White House is that the rooms are a little bit smaller than they appear to be, which is kind of fascinating.
Very true.
And that press room wasn't always that nice. It used to be a lot more packed. And I think it's called the James Brady press room now, and named after President Reagan's or press secretary. And that's really, again, it's been renovated over the years, and it's definitely now a spot to be. And what's really interesting is all the networks, this is kind of a history thing, they all have these kind of green canopies outside the walkway that goes in the James Brady room, where they have these kind of like, I would call them tents, where they go into and do their reporting, live shots, and they come out and go into the press room. It's kind of like almost a courtyard, if you will, people going around in circles all day. So again, they're covering a lot of things, so yes, it's all in real time.
They certainly are, and like I said, Fox 5's own Jim Loke in that room as well. You heard Corinne mention that someone from our station was there as well. So we are anticipating checking in with him at some point. Absolutely. It may not be in the next 14 minutes. The Live Zone Primetime only goes until 10 o'clock, and then our coverage continues on Fox 5 News at 10. This live stream, we may sign off, but we're going to keep this going because we want to watch what happens live. Yeah. Not to borrow a phrase from Andy Cohen and Bravo, but we do want to see what happens live. It is now 9:46. The White House, not necessarily known for always running on time.
And by the way, most White Houses aren't. Most of them are like 20, 30 minutes behind.
We're not pointing any fingers, but that does give us some time to go back to what we were talking about before Corinne joined us live, which was the swearing in of a new member of the House,
Yes.
and the Epstein emails.
Yes.
Tony P.
So back to where we left off. So a major thing has been going on in the House of Representatives and throughout Congress for the last year or so, since it was brought up by President Trump again on the campaign trail, the Epstein files. And it's bipartisan, far left, far right, all podcasts on different sides, supporters of the president, non-supporters of the president. The Epstein files are a very important thing because it showcases a few items: government corruption, cover-ups because of what happened in 2019 during President Trump's first term, where at the time Labor Secretary Alex Acosta had to resign because he at the time of the Epstein. So just to give you kind of a backtrack a little bit.
I do just want to say, though,
yeah.
right now what you're looking at
Yes.
is some of the emails that came out today
Yes,
that allegedly seem to imply that President Trump was aware
Yes.
of what was happening.
My apologies.
When it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. No. I
me-
just wanted to give a little context
Right,
to
what's
what
going
we
on
were
there.
looking at
Yes.
right then.
So the big breaking news. We'll just do the elephant in the room. So today there was a treasure trove of emails that were released about emails, not the files. There were emails released from Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff, who, if you remember, was the author of Fire and Fury from 2019. He had unlimited access to the Trump administration the first time and wrote an entire book about that. He is known for having some salacious takes, being involved in political gossip, and not always getting things accurately. But these are emails that are accurate, they're authenticated for what we know. There's still some confirmation needs to happen. But these emails showed that President Trump was potentially aware of the horrific activities that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were involved in. And it centers around a phrase used by Jeffrey Epstein that Trump was the dog that didn't bark, talking about the investigations that happened in 2005, 2006, and part of the early 2000s when Jeffrey Epstein was eventually indicted in the state of Florida for his horrific acts. What happened was the state attorney, the U.S. attorney for the Southern Florida district at the time in Miami, who was Alex Acosta, who ended up being President Trump's labor secretary in the first term. Some folks would say that he cut a sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein to get a reduced sentence. In many ways, he was able to go in and out of the prison during his year in confinement to do a work study or a type of program, and that received a lot of blowback as the years went on. Alex Acosta had to resign in 2019 because of that plea deal, and it began this real discussion of, was this a cover-up? Was this something that was malfeasance? Were the rich and powerful involved to keep this guy out of prison? And then, of course, you had Jeffrey Epstein's suicide, which has been debated in a lot of circles, left and right.
Conspiracy theories running wild. And
the
Tony
validity
P,
of that.
I will just say, this is one of those issues that has galvanized people on both sides of the
Sure
aisle.
has.
It has become a huge issue for the president's base,
It has.
especially on social media.
And he has gone at it with his own base because he talked about in 2024, releasing all the files. You had at the beginning of the term.
Remember everyone
Pam
coming
Bondi,
out with
yes.
their
all the influencers coming
their
out
books,
with their books about the first
holding
round of
them
the
up
Epstein
with
files.
the Epstein files.
And afterwards, there was a lot of blowback, not only from the influencers, the Attorney General Pam Bondi and the White House, but those influencers have millions of followers who are saying, wait a minute, these files were already released in the Biden administration years, and even before that. So what are we talking about here? Where are the real files? And at one point, Attorney General Pam Bondi was on, I think it was Fox and Friends, and she said, oh, we have all the files, we know who's involved. And then they sort of slow-rolled a lot of stuff and didn't release these files. And what happened in parallel were a lot of these, I would say, a lot more kind of populist-driven liberals and leftists, as well as some folks on the right, and kind of I would say the really strong conservative right, ended up forming some coalitions to try to get these files released. Speaker Johnson was very hesitant about it. The White House was against it. President Trump in a cabinet meeting saying, we're still talking about this. And after he brought it up during the election, and his follower base was not happy, and I've seen it the last few months, where a lot of some of his more vocal followers on X and Threads and even social, YouTube have said, hey, that's a red line for me. I thought he was going to do it. He's just like the rest of the politicians. I'm done with him. A lot of his followers have defended him, saying it's not a big deal. It's a distraction to give Democrats a leg up for them not talking about affordability and how, distraction from all the great things Republicans are doing. So there's a back and forth. There were some fractures in the MAGA base because of this, but
including on Capitol Hill,
right.
Because some big name House members, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Lauren
Lauren Boebert, have
Thomas
spoken out
Massey.
about this as well.
They sure
Earlier
have.
today, the White House press secretary responded to these new emails. Let me find the quote. The Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. That's according to Caroline Leavitt earlier today in her White House press briefing.
Exactly, and that's the typical spin. And when you look at the overall, is the crux of the emails, right? Mm-hmm. Again, the phrase I used before is the dog that wouldn't bark. What that referred to is that President Trump was not coming up in conversation about the Epstein investigation in 2018, 2019 with his indictment, or in the 2005 case in Palm Beach County. So there was, again, you can read it in a lot of different ways. Some folks read it as, oh, he must have known about it, so why is he not involved? He was a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. And some folks are reading it other ways. Oh, like maybe, he didn't know anything potentially. Again, there's a lot of ways to read that, but the preponderance of people are reading it as, oh, President Trump knew about this. And there was one also phrase as part of those emails that were released where Jeffrey Epstein is talking to Ghislaine Maxwell, I think, in an email exchange where he mentions that, that President Trump, when he was not president, was in the presence of one of Jeffrey Epstein's survivors of the horrific things that he did to them for multiple hours. In the presence, not involved, none of those things, but that he was in the presence of one of the victims / survivors for, multiple hours. So that was another kind of moment of the conspiratorial talk. How involved was he? Did he know? Was he actually involved deeper? There was also an email between Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein about when President Trump was running in 2015 about what's the PR strategy that President Trump could use if the Epstein connection was brought up in 2015.
Some critics on
that
social
also was like, what's the connection
and
there?
some critics on social media actually said that those emails seem to be trying to formulate a strategy for how to blackmail the president.
Right, exactly. And so does that mean that he knew about it and didn't report it? Does that mean that he was involved in other ways? We did have one of the survivors, Virginia Giuffre, who sadly just lost her life to suicide a few months ago. And her, of course, in our thoughts and prayers. She had mentioned in some of her deposition and testimony that President Trump had been around her in the past and he was nothing but a gentleman. So there are some conflicting accounts. These emails show a certain story. One of the things as well that these emails show is that the whole contention that President Trump threw Jeffrey Epstein out of his club, Mar-a-Lago, because he was a creep or did these offenses. That also gets pushed back on in the Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein back and forth, where I'm going to paraphrase. He says, "Oh, did Donald Trump mention that he threw me out?" No, I was never a member of Mar-a-Lago, and he knew about the girls in quotes because he told Ghislaine to stop. So, what does that mean? There were reports that there was some, again, I try to be very, very delicate with the situation. I know it's a political story now, but these are about many, many young women that were abused, that had horrific acts committed upon them. So I don't want to ever come off as that we're making this sensationalized. But there was some alleged recruitment done by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein on the Mar-a-Lago property. So is that what that reference is? Again, this is all alleged conduct. I don't want to be too sensational because, again, these are real people's lives that are impacted. But that is one thing that was considered the biggest thing when the president talked about this in 2019 when he first got indicted. Jeffrey Epstein getting indicted. And then throughout the last 5-6 years has been, I didn't really know Epstein. I was connected with him for a few years. I found out he was a creep. I threw him out of Mar-a-Lago. Well, that email exchange between Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein about whether it be the PR strategy to maybe blackmail the president or the stuff, but I wasn't a member of Mar-a-Lago, and Donald Trump knew about what was going on anyway and told Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. Does that show that he knew more than he let on? Was he closer to Jeffrey Epstein than he was? There was that birthday book released a few months ago where President Trump did write or allegedly write a message to Jeffrey Epstein. Again, hasn't been authenticated 100%, has not been confirmed, but these things start to pile on, and we're going to see who's going to react to this in what way. Because you have to remember, President Trump's coalition in 2024 electorally was a lot more diverse and a lot more fragile than his coalition in 2016. You had young men that had voted for President Joe Biden in the past now going to President Trump over things like affordability, masculinity, things to do with transparency and government corruption. So does that base fragment? Because you don't have as many, again, you have a lot of hardcore conservatives voting for him, but you have a coalition that's a lot bigger now, it's more diverse. So the question is, does that coalition fragment based on how the reaction happens? Now, to wrap this up, the reason why this representative getting sworn in is so important is because in parallel, members of both parties put together a bipartisan resolution and bill to release the full Epstein files, going around Speaker Mike Johnson, who really held this back as long as he could. But he did promise today that there will be a vote on the Epstein file discharge petition, which is basically a bill that bypasses the regular schedule in the House and the Speaker's discretion, because the Speaker is the one who can set the bill schedule. So that's what a petition means.
Tony, I do just want to hit pause for
one
1 second
because
it's 9:58 now. Obviously, still no sign of President Trump from the White House, but we are keeping an eye on it. Everyone who's watching on YouTube, we are keeping an eye on it. We're not taking you there. We're just waiting for the action to begin. Obviously, they said 9:45, but those are very loose times. What's going to happen, though, coming up here in the next minute and a half, if you're watching us on Fox Local, coverage will switch over to the Fox 5 News at 10, where Sidney Persing is covering this story for us. Obviously, Jim Loke is at the White House right now. He is covering this story for us. We will have team coverage on this on Fox 5 News at 10, Fox 5 News at 11, and then, of course, on the Final 5. But, Tony P., we can't cut away before this ends. So we will stay live here on YouTube as long as Tony P. doesn't have anywhere to be, and he's cool with it. So we will keep the coverage going. We will also take you back to Speaker Mike Johnson's press conference, because we were just talking about the Epstein files, and that was one of the questions he was asked shortly afterwards. So I'm going to go back to that while we stand by. The second we get word that that signing ceremony is about to begin, we will take you right back to it. But for everyone who has joined us here on Fox Local, thank you. Stay tuned for additional coverage coming up on Fox 5 News at 10 in just about 30 seconds. For those of you watching on YouTube, hang out with us, though, a little while longer, because we're going to keep things going. All right, so let's take you back to that press conference now a little earlier tonight.
Issues to continue doing what we've done, and we look forward to rolling that out for you in the next several days. A few questions, yes?
You said earlier that you would repeal that FBI provision that's in the bill right now. Do you have assurances from Leader Thune that he will bring it up in the Senate?
I did call Leader Thune this morning. I want to say that he's a principled leader. I've enjoyed working with him. We've got a great working relationship and a good friendship. He's a trustworthy, honest broker. And that's why I was so surprised when we found out about that provision that was put in our clean CR at the last moment. I'm just be honest, I'm very transparent with you all. I was very angry about it. I was. And a lot of my members called me and said, did you know about it? We had no idea. That was dropped in at the last minute. And I did not appreciate that, nor did most of the House members. Many of them are very angry about that. So we will be bringing that up. We'll probably pass it on suspension early next week, and we'll send it over to the Senate. I had a conversation with Leader Thune early this morning about it. I think he regretted the way it was done, and we had an honest conversation about that. I didn't ask him for any commitment at that time because I had a lot on my plate today, and I've been busy ever since that conversation we had early this morning. But I'm going to speak as truthfully to him as I am to all of you and tell you that I think that was way out of line. I don't think that was a smart thing to do. I don't think it was the right thing to do, and the House is going to reverse it. We're going to repeal that, and I'm going to expect our colleagues in the Senate to do the same thing.
Mr. Speaker, you said that you're for full transparency, so why not just urge all your Republicans to vote for this Massey Connell bill on the Epstein files next week? Put out all the files. Let the American public judge for themselves what these files are all about.
Thank you for asking the question. We have been for maximum transparency of the Epstein files from the very beginning. What I was opposed to is the reckless disregard that was used in drafting the discharge petition. And we've been over this many times, but it was not drafted in such a way that it would adequately protect innocent victims. We have a responsibility to do that. There's as many as 1,000 women, by some estimates, of people who have been victimized because of the sex trafficking and Epstein and all these horrendous, heinous crimes, and we can't have them subjected to any further harm. So we wanted to make sure that they were properly, whose names were properly redacted out of the files. But the discharge petition is not only reckless, it is also a totally moot point. The Oversight Committee has been working, as you all know, around the clock, working on this. And you have some of the toughest members of Congress on the Republican and Democrat side who are working in bipartisan fashion to go through and release those files. As we stand here tonight, I think we're up to over 50,000 pages of records that are out in the open. You can go online tonight if you're at home and go through it yourself. And the Epstein estate files thus far has been the biggest tranche of important information. We found that outside of the scope of the discharge petition because it was never even anticipated or included in the discharge. The Oversight Committee, well, let me finish. The Oversight Committee has been digging into that, and some of the most valuable information was in the estate files. It includes Jeffrey Epstein's own personal logs, his travel logs, his financial ledgers, his daily calendar. All this is now out in the public, and more is to come. Chairman Comer of the Oversight Committee has done an extraordinary job. You have, again, some of the most notable members in Congress working on that around the clock, and they will continue to have full disclosure. I want to say this tonight, and I think this is a shame to a lot of the Hill Press Corps. I'm not going to name any of you by name, but I haven't seen many stories written yet about the fact that we put the discharge up for unanimous consent on the floor tonight. The Republicans, the Speaker, and the Republicans asked for unanimous consent to just go ahead and pass the discharge because I think it's a moot point. The Democrats objected to the unanimous consent. Nobody's written a story about that. That's stunning to me. How can you miss that? If it was about transparency, if it was about full disclosure, there's two questions you should ask every Democrat in the House and Senate. Why didn't you bring this up during the 4 years of the Biden administration when the Biden DOJ had all these records the entire time? Nobody ever said a word about it. They didn't care. Now it's the biggest thing in the world. Didn't matter at all when Joe Biden had the files. And secondly, if they're for transparency and they really want all this to be out and there's such this urgency, then why did they vote down the unanimous consent to pass the discharge petition tonight? I can't answer that question, but they should. And every one of you should ask them about it. Yes.
Thank you. There are several members of your own conference that support at least a one-year extension of ACA subsidies. Others have alternative plans. Now that you're beyond this and as January 30th deadline looms, are you willing to put any one of those measures potentially on the floor?
I've been asked 100 times whether I'll commit to putting any ACA extension on the floor. What I have said from the very beginning, and we were consistent about this, and you all know from day one, the first order of business was to get the government open and working for the people again. It's the most basic responsibility, and we finally got that done tonight. And I said, as soon as the government was open, we would turn our attention to health care and all the other issues that are out there. We are willing to work and have always been willing to work in good faith with anybody in this building who wants to bring down the cost of health care. The Unaffordable Care Act, the ACA, did exactly the opposite of what they promised it. When the Democrats passed their health care law back in 2010, you all remember, the average American would have their premiums reduced by $2,500. They swore to you, and that was not true. And I think the people that drew it up knew it was not true in the very beginning. It was a lie. The people that were the architects of Obamacare, of the ACA, wanted single payer. They designed a system that they knew, they had to know, because they're really intelligent folks, was going to implode on itself. They knew that it was not sustainable. And what has happened since that time, and we're going to be going through this in great detail next week, get ready. We're going to take you through a timeline of who destroyed American health care. And I'll give you a hint. It didn't have anything to do with the Republican Party. It was the Democrats. They're the ones that gave you the Unaffordable Care Act. They're the ones that have been trying to subsidize it and prop it up and add to it ever since. We're the ones that have been trying to fix it. The Republican Party has. What has happened since the Democrats wrecked American health care is that your premiums have gone up by some cases 60%, in some cases more. And it's going to go up further. So their solution is right now they want to subsidize it further. They want to subsidize insurance companies. They want the COVID-era extension that was created by the Democrats themselves. They created the subsidy. They're the ones that put the expiration date of December 31 of 2025 on that. They knew it wasn't going to be permanent because it was a boondoggle. And now they're trying to claim it's Republicans' fault? The Democrats created it. The Democrats broke it. The Democrats are driving your cost up. Who are you going to trust to fix health care? It's the Republican Party, because we have volumes of ideas on how to do this, on how to fix it, on how to drive costs down, and how to increase access to care and quality of care, and you're going to see all that vigorous debate. So the answer to your question is, am I going to guarantee a vote on ACA unreformed COVID-era subsidies that is just a boondoggle to insurance companies and robs the taxpayer? We got a lot of work to do on that. The Republicans would demand a lot of reforms before anything like that was ever possible, and we have to go through that deliberative process. We have currently 433 members of the House of Representatives. There's a lot of opinions in this building, and on our side, certainly a lot of opinions on how to fix health care and make it more affordable. I have to allow that process to play out. I'll leave you with this. The biggest objection that I had to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who are playing political games with people's lives when they shut the government down, was Chuck Schumer came out and said the quiet part out loud. I don't even think he realized, he has no self-awareness. But he came and cried to all of you that I would not agree to go into a back room and make a four corners agreement on these issues. That just he and I and Hakeem Jeffries and Leader Thune would go in a room and make this decision for the entire population of America and block out all of our colleagues as if they had no voice in it. That is why Washington is broken. That's why Congress hasn't worked well for people. That's why they don't have a lot of faith in what goes on here. And I'm committed to trying to restore that faith. And one way we do that is we get back to regular order, and we allow all the duly elected members of this body to have their voices heard. I'm not playing games, and Chuck Schumer, I'm not going in a back room with you and making a four corners deal on anything. And I hope you understand that. Thank y'all. We got the government open. Let's celebrate tonight.
All right, so that was House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier tonight, answering questions from the press moments after the House passed the bill to reopen the government. A little behind the scenes of what's happening right now, Tony P. I will just let our viewers out there know that we are monitoring two feeds, what they call pool feeds, and that means all of the networks are sharing one live shot out of the White House. And what I can tell you is the bars have been dropped, but we're just looking at feet right now, which means the cameras are on the ground, which means they haven't been allowed into the Oval Office yet. They are standing outside of it. But the good news is that may mean we could just be moments away from the president about to sign this bill. Also, a couple housekeeping notes. I'm keeping track of what you are saying in our YouTube live stream. So I do just want to say that for Savannah Rogers and Velez Domingo, who say they came here from TikTok, what TikTok? Out of curiosity, what TikTok were you guys watching?
Oh, maybe it could have been mine. Maybe like
were you doing a live TikTok?
No, but maybe it's like from my TikTok account or your TikTok account, maybe.
But I'm not streaming live on TikTok. But yes, thank you for coming and let us know.
I don't care where you came
TikTok you were watching that brought you over here to our humble abode, as we like to call it. That's A. B. Let's see. Danielle says sign the bill. Yeah, we are standing by for that. INFNG says y'all wasn't lying, about to be 15 minutes past time. We're beyond that. We are now going on 25 minutes past time as well. Savannah also said, geez, people need to quit pointing fingers, both sides. And Velez says, yes, they do. So if you guys are tuning in right now to our live stream, thank you so much. We are live on YouTube. Fox Local, we signed off. Fox 5 News at 10 currently on there. But we did, we started this show promising that we would hopefully get to see that bill signing live. And so we didn't want to sign off until that happened. And hopefully, it's going to happen any moment.
And here's what's interesting now is that when this bill gets signed, and usually the structure of how this happens, usually with executive orders, President Trump will do kind of, I call it a monologue. He kind of goes back to his TV days a little bit, as a little monologue to introduce the bill. He'll have the staff secretary, I think it's Will Sharf is his name, will explain it, read it out, give the specifics of what he's signing. Then he'll talk about it, take a few questions. So it might be a few minutes before it's even signed when the cameras go up. But then he'll take a bunch of questions, and what will be interesting to see is, are there any nuggets of information that the president reveals through that back and forth, whether it be with the reporters or through his monologue and intro when he's signing the bill? Does he talk about things such as this healthcare debate that's still going to be going on in December and January? Does he talk about some of the shutdown updates in terms of employees getting back to work? When is everything going to be officially up and running again? Does he answer questions about the air traffic delays? Does he answer questions about tariffs and some of the things that came out today? There was some news where Secretary Bessent mentioned that they're going to be lowering the tariffs for some citrus products and coffee-based products here in the States for some of the international stuff there.
Yeah,
So
and
we'll see about
Tony's
that.
upset because they didn't mention pasta. As we
Good
talked
pull,
about
good pull 2 nights
earlier
ago.
this week, if you were
Yes,
watching.
every Italian American should be up in arms and any pasta lover. But with that being said, the biggest elephant in the room, will he take questions about the Epstein emails today and the vote that Speaker Johnson just committed to releasing them next week, potentially, depending on the vote of the discharge petition.
Yeah,
Because
so-
we heard the news tonight that broke, I think it was from the New York Times and Axios, where they talked about how the White House approached Lauren Boebert, one of the main signatories for that discharge petition to release the Epstein files around Mike Johnson in the summer. There were conversations about that. So is there going to be potentially some behind-the-scenes work to get the Republican votes to peel off of that? Who knows? Because there are many members of the Republican caucus, whether it be Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Boebert, that have no problem going against the president. So we're going to start to see the legislative connection between the president, his base, and his base in Congress, which will be very, very fascinating. And what he's going to answer, how does he approach it? Does he give away some of the stuff that's going on with the healthcare discussion? Does he maybe, and he's known for doing this, he'll unleash a plan. He talks about tariff refund checks. He'll talk about Space Force. He might come out with a healthcare plan tonight. A lot of folks have been waiting for it for the last 8 to 10 years, but he might come out and talk about it tonight and maybe start putting something out there because that's his strategy. He'll throw something at the wall that may not be the final passage, and then there'll be a discussion about that. So how does he take this moment and shift it away? Because many observers have said that the Republican Party and the president did lose this shutdown, even though Democrats, according to some folks, did cave in getting the 8 votes to come on after they were seen as leading the shutdown fight.
Yeah, that's right. And still
starting to see
just
some
a
movement.
little behind the scenes, we are watching some
Yeah.
movement. It looks like the press has
Yep,
been
he's here.
allowed
Yep.
into. We're going to listen in live now.
We're getting started.
Tony P and I are still here, but we're going to listen
Yep.
in live.
Well, thank you very much. This is a big day tonight. Very important what is taking place because we've seen how good government can be and how bad government can be when people don't know what they're doing. For the past 43 days, Democrats in Congress shut down the government of the United States in an attempt to extort American taxpayers for hundreds of billions of dollars for illegal aliens and people that came into our country illegally, from gangs, from prisons, from mental institutions. They wanted to pay them $1.5 trillion, which would have really hurt our healthcare businesses and our recipients at levels never seen before. Today, we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. They tried to extort, the Democrats tried to extort our country. In just a moment, I'll sign a bill exactly like we asked Democrats to send us all along, many days ago. This cost the country $1.5 trillion, this little excursion that they took us on. Republicans never wanted a shutdown and voted 15 times for a clean continuation of funding. There's never been a time when one or the other party ever didn't sign a continuation. It's just a continuation, not a big deal. It's a continuation and we'll talk later. Yet the extremists in the other party insisted on creating the longest government shutdown in American history, and they did it purely for political reasons. I want to thank Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, and numerous other great Republican leaders and congressmen and senators who are here, who frankly spent a long time in Washington getting this thing to go away. I also want to thank the broad coalition of Americans that stood with us in this fight to reopen government, including the Teamsters, the American Federation of Government Employees, the Fraternal Order of Police, AMVETS, the National Small Business Association, the American Farm Bureau, the American Trucking Association. These are all incredible patriots. The Airlines for America, the Allied Pilots Association, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and many others, unions and non-unions. Over the past 7 weeks, the Democrats' shutdown has inflicted massive harm. They caused 20,000 flights to be canceled or delayed. They departed so many times, so late. People were hurt so badly. Nobody's ever seen anything like this one. This was a no-brainer. This was an easy extension. But they didn't want to do it the easy way. They had to do it the hard way. They look very bad, the Democrats do. They deprived more than 1 million government workers from their paychecks and cut off food stamp benefits for millions and millions more Americans in need. They caused tens of thousands of federal contractors and small businesses to go unpaid, and the total effect of the damage their antics caused will take weeks and probably months to really calculate accurately, including the serious harm that they did to our economy and to people and to families. So I just want to tell the American people, you should not forget this. When we come up to midterms and other things, don't forget what they've done to our country. I also want to call for a termination to the filibuster so that this can never happen again. If we had the filibuster terminated, this would never happen again. And don't forget, we have another date coming up in the not too distant future. We can never let this happen again. And we should be able to pass great, really great legislation. So I say terminate the filibuster because, by the way, the Democrats will do it immediately if they ever assumed office, which hopefully they won't. Today we had the highest stock market price ever in all of the different markets. We set a record. It's the 48th time in the 9 months that I've been in office that we had this record set. So think of that, 48 times we had a record set, but today is the highest of them all. We're going to break new grounds. Nobody would have thought. I have with us not only the great political leaders, but the great business leaders of our country. They're standing right behind me and right really alongside of me. And if we would have told them a year ago that we'd be having stock prices this high, none of them, in fact, I just asked them that question, none of them would have believed it. And that inures to jobs and, very importantly, to 401ks, which have also set a record today, a record high for the people that have 401ks. And also, I want to thank Walmart because they came up with a fantastic study. It was the cost of Thanksgiving coming up and the cost of Thanksgiving from a year ago under Sleepy Joe Biden, and we're 25% lower this year than we were a year ago. And it's a very inclusive report, so I want to thank Walmart. They've done it for many years, but we believe in that. We believe in that company. I want to also thank the 8 Senate Democrats who finally did the right thing in voting to end this craziness, this madness, but unfortunately the vast majority of congressional Democrats were happy for millions of Americans to suffer. They really did suffer too. And the Democrats admitted, they said, well, no, we finally have a point. Even though people have to suffer, we finally have a point, and that didn't work out too well for them. But they really went out and they could appease the fringe benefits of their far-left base, but that didn't work out because now their far-left base is angrier than ever before. We actually elected a mayor of New York City who happens to be a communist. When was that going to happen? Remember I said all the time during my campaign, we will never be a socialist country, and that's right. We turned out to have a communist in New York City, and if you look at his views, those are the views of a communist, not a socialist. So this is no way to run a country. I hope we can all agree that the government should never be shut down again, end the filibuster, terminate the filibuster, it'll never happen again. So with my signature, the federal government will now resume normal operations, and my administration and our partners in Congress will continue our work to lower the cost of living, restore public safety, grow our economy, and make America affordable again for all Americans. Again, costs are way down. Energy is way down. Gasoline is at $2.50 a gallon versus $4.70 for the Democrats. And we think we're going to hit pretty close to $2 a gallon. That's like a really massive tax cut. It's the equivalent of that. And speaking of tax cuts, our great, big, beautiful bill is giving everybody in our economy, middle income workers, low income, everybody, the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. And it's no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and very importantly, no tax on overtime. You work overtime, there's no tax. That's among the things that add up to the biggest tax cut in history. One other thing, you hear about rich people with deductions. Well, when you buy your car and you borrow money, you're allowed to now deduct the interest on that loan. So you can take that interest deduction and what you can take is that interest payment and deduct it for income tax purposes. That's a tremendous tax cut right there. But it all includes fixing the healthcare system the Democrats broke with the disaster known as Obamacare. Obamacare was a disaster from day one. It's done nothing but go up. And if you remember President Barack Hussein Obama, when he came up with this crazy idea, he said everything's going to be great. Rates are going to go down. Payments are going to go down. Everything's going to go down. It went the exact opposite with the biggest increase of healthcare in any country. It's a disaster. And I'm calling today for insurance companies not to be paid, but for the money, this massive amount of money, to be paid directly to the people of our country so that they can buy their own health care, which will be far better and far less expensive than the disaster known as Obamacare. And I've had, I think, great support. I've even had Democrat support. So we want the money that would be going to the insurance company, which is hundreds of billions of dollars. Their stock prices have gone up by 1,000% in many cases, 1,000% over a short period of time, because our country stupidly pays them so much money with this Obamacare scandal. So I want the money to go directly to you, the people. And you go out and you'll buy your own health insurance and you'll negotiate different plans and you'll get much better insurance and you will be an entrepreneur for yourself. So I'm always willing to work with anyone, including the other party. We'll work on something having to do with health care. We can do a lot better. We can do great. So much money is involved, and we're willing to pay so much money to the people. So we're going to pay a lot of money to the people. They're going to go out and buy their own health care, and we're going to forget this Obamacare madness. So with all of that, I just want to tell you the country has never been in better shape. We went through this short-term disaster with the Democrats because they thought it would be good politically. And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions. I think we really have a really great situation. We have a country that we love, and we have a country that's in great shape. As you know, we have now it's over $18 trillion invested in our country by other people and countries. That's a record. There's never been a country that had so much, and that money's going into also building new auto plants, new AI plants, new everything. We've never had a time like this. Thank you very much, everybody.
Mr. President, are you prepared to negotiate with Democrats now?
Mr. President, on Jeffrey Epstein.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you respond to these Epstein emails that were released today?
Well done, Mr. President. Mr. President, any comment on these Epstein emails? Good job. All right. So there it was. You got to see it live. Now they're ushering the press out of the Oval Office, and that will do it. But President Trump, 10:24 p.m., officially signed the bill to reopen the government and end this historic 43-day shutdown. Couple notes there. The president, in his remarks before he signed that bill, he called to end the filibuster, to stop any future shutdowns. He talked about Thanksgiving prices. He talked about gas prices. He talked about the new New York City mayor. He talked about tax cuts, taxes on tips. He talked about Obamacare finally, and then he talked about his plan for health care without giving many specifics, but he talked about abolishing Obamacare, taking the money that the government paid to insurance companies, and putting it directly in people's pockets. Tony P., I know a lot of people have said that they've waited 8 years or more for him to unveil a health care plan, and I don't think they got that tonight.
I mean, it's sort of more of the same. It's basically repeal, and then, I mean, he said, first of all, he blamed the ACA, so there's no softening of the language on the ACA and President Trump. Again, you've seen, of course, his views of Social Security, and with Medicare, not touching that, not cutting it. Benefits may even go up compared to to other Republican administrations. Totally different than President Bush or Bush Sr. or other Republicans in the past. But he is going scorched earth, it looks like, on the ACA again. It seems that he is going to use this interregnum between this shutdown for 43 days and the potential
big word,
next
Tony
one.
P. That's an SAT word
It is.
there.
Listen, I like my big words now and again. Like the president, big words. So that period of time, it looks like he's going to ramp up the pressure to get Republicans to get rid of the ACA, scrap it, and in his words, basically give the money directly to the people. He mentioned a lot about insurance companies making billions more in profits, 1,000% increase in profits since Obamacare, and we need to basically stop sending the money to the health insurance companies, and then it needs to go to the people.
But zero details.
Details on and the mechanics of that is basically what he is saying is that he would eliminate the exchanges, and he said a lot. People just could be able to go buy directly from the insurance company, be your own entrepreneur with your own health care. In a lot of ways, health care previous to the ACA and now with the exchanges, a lot of the money that goes to the insurance companies is from the people's premiums and the pooling of everybody paying premiums to cover insurance. Most of the government money is coming from subsidies. So to keep costs lower for Americans, and as I mentioned at the top of the hour, the ACA has gained in popularity since 2010, when it first got passed, and 2013, 2014 when it was released. There are over 50% approval from the American public, including a lot of Republican voters. So this is going to be a tough sell, especially with a quick timeline for January 31st to get the shutdown averted for a second time. Then he has to go and put a whole new bill together before the midterms, and who knows if that's going to have some problems if it even gets passed, because you have a lot of moderate Republicans in Kamala Harris districts that she won in 2024, or softer Trump districts that will not want to run on the ACA being scrapped or even peeled back more than it has been. So that's going to be quite the interesting battle, especially where the moderate coalition is going to meet some of the even quote-unquote far-right coalition with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she was calling for subsidies. So this is going to be a totally... I'm surprised by the tack that he's taking, and we're going to see if this works out for him in the long run, as well as in the coming month or so as they have these negotiations. Will there be a Trump care that comes out, or is he just going to cut out the guardrails of the Affordable Care Act and make it the Wild West? We'll see.
We will see. It's now 10:30. Thank you, everyone who has joined us for this special 90-minute edition of the Live Zone Primetime. Before we sign off, I do just want to read some more of these comments. Thank you to everyone who has joined the chat tonight.
Active.
I know Savannah said, I just can't wait to be able to feed my kids, and I think a lot of people agree with that. Savannah also says, I appreciate the fact the government is open, but this long government withholding SNAP when disabled need food assistance, in my eyes, was beyond cruel. So I know a lot of people just happy that this is finally
I'm happy
open,
people
so
being fed. Thank you for being
absolutely.
so honest and vulnerable, all of you,
absolutely.
for mentioning that, because, and the sad thing is, I said this a lot throughout the last 43 days now, is that shouldn't be happening. You should not, a month should not go by and people can't afford
especially when
food.
Politicians are getting paid throughout the duration of that shutdown.
And just generally, we should have an economy that benefits everybody, where you don't have to, not every paycheck, that's again, you shouldn't miss a paycheck anytime, but if you miss a couple, we should not live in an economy where people are going to go hungry. They're going to lose their rent. They're going to lose their food assistance. Like, what are we doing? Just to be kind of opinionated for a second, this is across the aisle. People believe this. When are we going to get to an economy that benefits people where they're not living paycheck to paycheck all the damn time? And I think this is something like COVID that exposed to a lot of people how close we are as individuals to losing our ability to, have a roof over our head, to feed our kids. I mean, we need to have some serious discussions about how we deal with the economy, because it's not just about stock prices and yachts to sail behind. It's about people like, the folks in our comment section that are going through hell right now to pay their family and, to get paid and support their family. So just God bless you, provide. Yeah. And God bless you all for being so vulnerable and for just dealing with this throughout the 43
days. And thank you to everyone who joined us in the Zoom room tonight. We're going to sign off for now. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, same place, 9 o'clock here on YouTube and Fox Local. In the meantime, you can switch over. More coverage coming up. Second half of Fox 5 News at 10 on Now. Fox 5 News at 11. And the Final Five, Jim Loke. We saw him walking out of the White House there.
At the end,
we'll look for a live report from him. In the meantime, Tony P.
Good to see you, my friend. We sure did.
We'll be back tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.